but
yeah, it's all right. And now we welcome in a previous guest on this podcast. You know him from his many television appearances, including being a judge on Chopped, also his record label that he has as well, and his restaurants, Beauty and Essex and Stanton Social, and many more. And he recently won an award, a Polestar Award, no less, for his collaboration with Metallica on a hamburger, which is pretty metal. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you? What's
I'm
happening?
good. I'm good. So
you're too humble. You should have said his record label, Blacklight Media Records, which you co-created with me.
Well, yeah. Well, you created it. Yes, Blacklight Media Records. Very important. I figured it would have come up sometime in our conversation.
Yeah.
So the last time we had you on, we talked Metallica. And that's one of our most popular podcasts. So I figure we should run it back and do that again, since it did so well the first time. You're the resident expert on Metallica here on the 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal podcast.
Love it. I love it.
But this time I want to do something a little bit different. And I wanted to talk about something newer. We haven't really talked about any newer songs yet on this podcast. And I don't want to completely ignore if there's a lot of great music being played now, especially by big bands like Metallica. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Hardwired came out, I love that record. I thought I was like, wow, this is really the return to their roots that they tried on Death Magnetic, but didn't quite get it done the right way, I think. Mm-hmm. Although it's still a really great record. But this one I thought was just a perfect record. And this song that we're going to talk about today, that Spit Out the Bone, ends the record. And it's one of it's probably right now in my top 10, certainly top 15 Metallica songs ever. It's like just the perfect song. It's super heavy. The subject matter is great. Like all the rhythms and melodies, the leads, like everything about this song is, like I said, there aren't very many perfect metal songs, but this, I would venture to say, is pretty close to one.
Yeah, I mean, so for starters, Hardwired is, and we've talked about this, privately, like Hardwired is, I put that record up there with anything they've done. I mean, it's hard to really, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master, and even Injustice. Like that's among the greatest, if not the greatest, first 3 or 4 records that anyone's ever put out ever.
Yep.
And then they kind of did a whole bunch of other stuff, and then Hardwired came out, and they really brought back the best, the best that they could be. And that record to me also, when we talk about 3 or 4 things, like the first 3 or 4 songs on Hardwired, I think measure up to almost anything they've done. I mean, it's just that record's relentless at the beginning, and then the pace kind of slows a little bit, and then it almost, the Spit Out the Bone almost catches you by surprise at the end, because it's a really, really vicious track that really harkens back to, I would say probably harkens back mostly to, somewhere in between Master and Injustice, because it's technical, but it's just, the song, it's the last song on the record, but it feels like it could have opened the record.
Yeah, right.
And if I'm correct, I think when they did the Hardwired tour, they actually opened the show with Spit Out the Bone on many occasions.
They did. I didn't know that, actually. Yeah. It was funny because when they did that tour, I mean, I love that song. I think the record's great, and you're right. The first side, basically side 1, if you go that way. I mean, that whole side, like every song is pretty spectacular. But this one kind of goes back to the early days where they finished with a really fast, heavy song. Mm-hmm. And I love that song. So I texted Lars, I think it was the first or second time I saw them on that tour. And I said, hey, I'm coming to see you guys in a week or 2 or whatever. And I said, hey, I'm putting in my request right now for Spit Out the Bone, because they'll let me pick songs here and there, and then they're very nice about playing them most of the time. But he laughed and he said, yeah, we're not quite up to speed on that one yet. In fact, he said one of his kids was like, how are you going to play that live? Because there's a lot going on in that song. And Lars, as great a drummer as he is not the spring chicken, but he was able to obviously do it, which is no surprise. And it took them a minute to get there. I also think that there were so many, bigger hits on that record that this is kind of a bit of a deep track, but it's become one of the more popular songs on their record.
Yeah. And something that I learned along the way is that they view that more. And it's weird because I think it would do great, on their current tour, which is obviously all stadiums. But I read Lars had said somewhere along the way that they felt that this song was an arena song and not a stadium song, which is really interesting to me.
Yep.
But it's just it's a very precise, very technical song in a way. It kind of has a lot of the Metallica hallmarks, with the riffing. As the song goes along, it's kind of a journey. There's so many things about the song that it's 7 minutes, which is I guess fairly standard for a Metallica song. But 70.
That's a short one.
Yeah, right. I'm a big fan of 72 Seasons. I will be honest, I wasn't sure how I felt about the record until I started going to 72 Seasons shows and hearing the 72 Seasons tracks live kind of really opened the record up for me. And now I love that record. But some of the songs I do feel like they maybe could have been trimmed up maybe a little bit. And they're still great songs, don't get me wrong. But this song is, for 7 minutes, feels lean and mean and the right length. You know what I mean? It doesn't meander, It doesn't go too far, doesn't outlast its welcome. And there's just so much going on. Like, James's vocal delivery is so powerful. It's still melodic, but I think, it has some viciousness to it. The production of this song, I feel like, is amazing. Like the bass is nice and thick, and the snare is sharp, but and snappy. It's some of the best production. The whole record is some of the best production I think Metallica's ever gotten, or ever achieved. And I know they kind of did the record sort of themselves with a producer at their headquarters, right?
Yep.
And there's even, then they sneak a bass solo in there, a small Rob bass solo in there. Rob gets a chance to do some serious, vocalization. There's just so much going on, and while Kirk's kind of solos sound like Kirk solos, they're very trademark Kirk sounding. I also read at some point that all the solos he did on Hardwired, he kind of improvised in the studio, except for this one, because this song is so precise. He actually really wrote this solo out specifically. I don't know that you would know that by listening to it, because it just sounds like a Kirk solo, but it's got that swing and that groove, and then all the at the end.
Yep. I can definitely see that. Sorry, I can definitely see that, because that solo is so good and so melodic. It sounded to me like something he would have written out. Like all the other solos, exactly, you could kind of tell, but this one felt like it was written out beforehand.
Yeah. Yep. And there's some sneaky technical drumming. Lars.
Yep.
Lars. We've talked about this before too. Lars kind of gets some stick from people. People don't appreciate, and he's not the most technical drummer that ever lived, but he's really does some very creative things within the bandwidth that he has. And there's a part in this song where he does this kind of off rhythm cymbal and snare hit that it's really subtle, but it's really cool.
Yeah, I one of the many things I like about the song, and we can certainly dissect it a bit, is the transitions. And transitions in especially in metal, for me, is always a big thing. And I look back at, and we had Dave Lombardo on this podcast talking about that, and you can go back and listen to that after you finish listening to this episode, please. But we talked about Dave and the transitions, because he makes these seamless transitions of where you're going from the song's going from one part to a completely different part, but it works so well together. And this song, there's a couple of those changes where it's like there's one part where it's like, they start there's a whole kind of progressive little thing, and they go back into the main riff, and it kind of goes like it switches on in a split second where it's like, whoa, but it works so well. I was like, wow, that was amazing how they made that transition from that one part to the other part, and it just works so perfectly. And that like I said, I love things like that, especially in metal.
Yeah, no, for sure. It just feels so fresh, and it's funny because when you asked me to come on and do this with you today, I kind of revisited the record and that song, and I love that. I listened to that record quite a bit, but it's like, oh my God, that's almost 10 years ago.
I know.
It's crazy.
I don't like to hear that.
But you think about that record and that song and the first few songs, like they really, that song, Spit Out the Bone, could have been, I think it could have fit on Master, or probably it feels more like an And Justice song. However, I'm glad it wasn't on And Justice, because I think the production on this one is nice and, meaty, and does the song a lot of justice. But it, no pun intended. But it just feels like a song that could have been written by earlier day Metallica, and it's great to see. And they've done this with a few tracks on 72 Seasons as well. It's great to see that they can still dive in. You and I were at one of the 72 Season shows, and we were backstage saying hello to the guys, and I remember James saying to you specifically, like, that he was grateful that the riffs still keep coming to him, even at this stage in his career. And this song is a perfect example. I mean, the main riff is a great riff that is like, it's Metallica, even if you didn't know it was Metallica. It's only Metallica could write that kind of a riff.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think that's one of the reasons why I don't think I know that's one of the reasons why I chose it, because it shows one of the biggest bands of the world went back to their roots and made a record that easily could have come out in 1985, 86, 87. And I kind of knew that was going to happen a little bit, because right before Death Magnetic, or not right before, but I guess when they were starting to write it, Lars hit me up and said, "Hey, can you send me and James a copy of the compilation album that we did? Because we did this 1979 New Wave of British Heavy Metal compilation that Lars actually put together, and we released it in North America." It was very nice of him to ask us to do that. So they wanted to go back and kind of revisit where they came from, and that that it's Iron Maiden and Diamond Head and Def Leppard and Saxon, everybody from, that was the new wave of British heavy metal that all of us grew up on and had a huge influence on all of us. And they wanted to go back and kind of listen to that again and get some fresh ideas. And Death Magnetic came out again, and that was in the right direction, certainly more like old school Metallica. But this record, I think, just completely nailed it. And specifically this song is just such a great song. Like you mentioned, the riffs are amazing. The leads are great. The melodies and hook lines throughout the song, whether it's the guitars or the drums or the bass or the vocals, they all just kind of work together perfectly. And that doesn't happen a lot of times. And that's a very dangerous song for me to play when I'm driving a car. Because I was moving to Vegas right when that came out. So I was kind of going back and forth a lot. And I remember a few times that song would come on, and I would look down, and I'm going like 90 some odd miles an hour. I should probably slow down a little bit.
Right. Well, as you know, your listeners, obviously, or whoever's listening to this doesn't know, but, I lived in New York City for almost 30 years, and I actually been in LA for 5 years. But when I was in New York, I let my license lapse, so I haven't had a driver's license in a long time. But nonetheless, I bought a 1970 Chevelle 4 years ago, spent the last 4 years restoring it. I finally got my license a couple of months ago, and I've been going out and I've been listening to Metallica exclusively in the Chevelle. And when you asked me to do this, you sure know I got in that Chevelle and I started driving up and down the 101, listening to this song and that record. And yeah, I found myself with the pedal down as far as it would go. So I totally
which is rare on the 101 freeway, by the way. So was that like 4 in the morning or something?
Go at the right time, you'll be okay. Another thing about this song is lyrically, I feel like it's a departure from what James typically will write, or the band will typically write. Right.
It's the lyrics are brilliant, though.
Yeah. When you think about, like, I don't know, songs like Unforgiven or some of the stuff on 72 Seasons, it feels a little more based in, I don't want to say human emotion, but human emotion, things that people go through. This is totally about, like, futuristic society and like Terminator type stuff, and well, you know what, everything that's happening right now, right, with AI, we're all freaked out, like
100%.
It feels like a cautionary tale almost, the lyrics to this song.
Yeah, and that's why I think they're brilliant, because he's spot on. I mean, he's talking about machines taking over the world, and that we're seeing that now, like you said, with AI and all these robots. I mean, here in Vegas, robots are taking over the casino industry, where people who used to serve you drinks or make the drinks, or not make. They're robots making the drinks now, and pretty
Yes.
soon they're probably robots serving you the drinks. But it's a really interesting when you break down the lyrics and read about it. It's basically the time when the robots and machines take over and get rid of man. Hence the spit out the bone title, which is just great. When I first heard the lyrics, I was kind of like, that's different. And then more listening to the song more and really getting into the lyrics, I was like, wow, this is, and then, like you said, this is like 10 years ago. So, and we're seeing how smart he was about what was happening, that he saw what was going to happen, which again is just a really brilliant thing. And to go on a wider path with James and lyrics, you go back to, the early albums that was, Anger and Misery and, all this really super stuff. Then it kind of, moved around and the last like 3 or 4 records have been very much, especially 72 Seasons, obviously, which I don't want to say it's a concept record, but it kind of is, based on what he went through and his whole thing. But it's really interesting how he's evolved as a songwriter lyrically from where they first were to where they are now. It still all works, and the subject matter is varying and certainly different, but it still all really works. And it just shows you, again, how talented that guy is.
Mm-hmm. And he's right, because this is not going to end well for us.
No. Thankfully, hopefully we'll all be gone by then, but we won't see it. Or hopefully, but
if you've been reading the news lately, apparently there's an alien mothership heading our way. That's going to be in 100 days or something. So who knows?
I've heard a lot about that, but I've heard that about 100 times. But anyway,
one thing I have to be better at is watching videos. I don't typically. I listen to music every waking moment of the day, as long as if I'm not in a meeting or something, if I have a chance to be listening to music, I'm listening to music, is my point. Yeah. But I don't usually take the time to sit and watch videos. So when you asked me to do this with you and then talk about this song specifically, I actually looked up the official music video, which I had never seen before. I'm going to be completely honest. And it's a little cartoony. It's a little bit, it's like comic booky in a way. But I was thinking about these rumors that they might be going and doing a Sphere residency at some point. And watching that video, I was like, oh my God, like this video or some variation of this video with these like cyborgs, attacking and killing people and lighting civilizations on fire and everything else. Like, how amazing would that play at the Sphere?
Right. Yeah. And Lars said that this is James said, actually, this is an arena song. So, and Sphere is an arena. So I'll have to put that bug in their ear at some point, because obviously, I love this song so much. And I knew that they were going to do the Sphere because, and I've talked about this before on this show and a couple other shows. When I went to go see U2 for the first time, like U2 and Metallica are really tight. They're basically brothers, and they've been super friends for a long time. And I know Lars was at the opening night of U2 at Sphere. So I texted him. I said, "Hey man, I'm going to see U2 at the Sphere tonight." He said, "Oh, you got to let me know what you think." And it's such a crazy thing. I go, okay. Mm-hmm. So after the show, he texted me and said, "What do you think?" I go, "I need like a night or 24 hours to digest what I just saw, because it's just so amazing." So we texted the next day about it, and I could tell he just loved that. He loved the Sphere. He loved the technology of it. He's like game changer, all these kind of words. So I kind of thought like they'll probably end up doing this at some point. Plus, they're a bucket list band. They want to do everything humanly possible, especially when it comes to live shows. And what else could be great? Sphere. I mean, they have to Metallicaize it somehow, which I'm sure they will. And they haven't obviously announced officially, but I think both Lars and Robert said, yeah, it's going to get done. But that's a great thing. I didn't really think about the video part of it, so I'll have to mention that. Like, hey, that video the bone is pretty good.
Right. But even like Master of Puppets, right? Like like that on this at the Sphere, what they could do visually with that would be totally insane. Which is interesting, because I don't know if you saw this week, not to get into controversy, but Bruce Dickinson was like basically said the Sphere is definitely something that Iron Maiden would never consider.
Yeah, I saw that, and I totally get that, because Maiden is more of a visual band in terms of what they do live than having a lot of different imagery, and they're also a band that they do whatever they Well, they do, but they also just do what they do. And I don't think something like the Sphere, which number one, is expensive, obviously.
Right.
And number two, weirdly enough, I remember talking to Rod Smallwood, by the way, which if you would have told 18-year-old me that I'd become friends with him later in life, I would have said, you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But talking to him at one of the last Maiden shows in the last tour, and he was saying that this is Iron Maiden's worst touring market. Everywhere else in the world, they play stadiums, but they don't play stadiums in the US because they're just not quite that big here. So I was telling him I love the fact that that's the case because I'd much rather see them at an arena.
Sure.
I would wonder even if they could pull off a long run here. And I think, it works for some bands. I don't think it would work for Maiden, doing the same thing over and over again. I never say never, but I can see where they're coming from. It definitely is one of those things where, like, Maiden, we're gonna, like I said, they do what they do, and they're not gonna follow a trend, so to speak. Whereas Metallica, I think they like to do different things, and they clearly could. I mean, if they wanted to, they could probably play 50 shows there and sell them all out. But I don't think they'll do that. I have a feeling it'll be 8 to 12, maybe max, because they're not really a residency sort of band. But who knows? We'll see.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because even on this 72 season stadium tour, they, with the limited amount of like video screen that they actually have, they do have a lot of illustrative kind of theatrical kind of video.
Yeah.
And I don't know obviously how the Sphere works, but I would think just the coming up with a visual presentation would probably mean you'd have to do more than 8 or 12 shows. I mean, the cost involved to create a program like that would be like phenomenal.
Yeah, basically 8 is the break-even point. So if you do 8 shows, that pretty much will break even. Depends on how much they do and what it does, but that's pretty much the break-even point. So they've got to do at least 8. And we'll see from there. Also, the staging is going to be really interesting because Metallica's, like, I don't think they'll play very well on a small stage like U2 or the Eagles or Backstreet Boys or whatever it is. They can work on a small stage, and then the graphics are the big thing. But Metallica, I would imagine, would have to have a much wider stage there. But because I can't see them, although then again they're playing a 250 seat club, so who knows?
They are in the Hamptons of all places. But yeah, so sort of circling back, if they do the Sphere, I think I would like to think that they would put spit out the bone in there, because I just feel like it would work perfectly, from a visual kind of standpoint,
From your mouth to Metallica's ears, please.
What do you think? Do you think that I don't want to move away from the song if you want to continue to talk about the song, but do you think
I do? Well, I'll let you finish up in a second. I do want to mention one thing about this song and the production, because you mentioned the production earlier, how good it was. So when they made that movie Through the Never, they had a screening. I think it was in New York. They had one of the screenings before it came out. It's kind of a friends and family screening thing. So I went and watched it. And, the live stuff was just incredible. And the sound of the live stuff was unbelievable. I was sitting in the IMAX theater, whatever it was, and I couldn't believe how well they sounded. And the first person I talked to afterwards was James. And I said, man, who was the engineer or producer on that stuff? Because I don't know that I've ever heard you guys sound that good. He says this guy, Greg Fiddleman, who started with Death Magnetic, because he was one of Ruben's guys. And he did not obviously mess up the mastering of that. That was that was the producer, not the engineer. But it sounded so great. And James was like, yeah, we really like him a lot. And so he's basically been their engineer ever since then. So much so that when you and I talked to James in Phoenix before the show, I was telling him, like, you've got to keep Greg Fiddleman. I mean, you guys have never sounded so good the last 2 records. Production was amazing. And just like, he's not going anywhere. He's stuck with us for life. I think he's mixing all their live shows now, what they put out for the public to get. And so yeah, they've locked him down in Metallica world now. So, which is great because he's so good and a great guy too.
That's great. Yeah.
All right, so continue on. Sorry.
Well, that was, it's a great segue into what I was going to say, which is, do you think they have another record in them?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I just know from Greg, because I'm trying to get him to do a couple things, that he's super busy, and I can't imagine that it's only on the live shows. So I would imagine. I mean, they were on Howard Stern a few years ago, and Howard asked them, and I thought this was a really great question. like you guys don't need to make any more music. You can tour forever on all the music you've created, and it's all completely amazing. Why? And I think this is what I would ask a lot of artists in their position as well, because some artists can do it and some can't. But they said that we're artists and we create art. This is what we do. And we're going to keep creating it because that's our lifeblood. That's, I mean, touring is great. We love touring. We love seeing our fans, but creating art that's what we do. That's what gets us up in the morning and stuff. So I thought that was really interesting because, you wonder about, is Maiden going to make another record? Is, some of these older artists, and they're all still making really great art at this stage in their career. So yeah, I would imagine Metallica's got a couple more in them, hopefully at least.
I mean, it's not that I don't think that they have the creativity to do it. I'm just thinking more of they've been on this tour for so long. I don't think it's quite over yet. Then there's rumors that they might do the Super Bowl, and then that would springboard into the fall 2026 Sphere thing. Like, when do they have time to even get to write? You know what I mean? Unless they're writing all the time.
Well, they only do 50 shows a year. I mean, it seems like they do more, but there's only 50. I think James only does 50 shows a year. So, but it's spread out over time, obviously. So they definitely, I mean, when they made 72 seasons, I was kind of surprised that it came. I mean, it wasn't that fast, but it came, fast enough, I guess. So yeah, I'm sure I haven't asked them, but I'm sure they're doing more stuff for sure. And there's time. Like I said, they love being in the studio. They love creating music. I'm sure they've got, and even as you mentioned earlier, talking to James about the riffs, he goes, yeah, they keep coming. So I'm sure he's got hours and hours of great riffs still.
And then, what do you think? Do you think that there's a chance that they'll get the Super Bowl nod since it's San Francisco? 2026?
Well, here's the thing. So that's a really good question, because I've talked to not only the band about this, but a lot of other people about it as well. And that's one thing that they absolutely want to do. It's like I mentioned, their bucket list. That's on their bucket list. Problem is the one person, or not the one person, but basically the guy that's booking the Super Bowl is Jay-Z, and he's not a rock guy. So. And I mean, even though his company's named Rock Nation.
All they need to do is just do 1 year of rock, and then they can go back to 10 or 15 years of what they've been doing all along.
I know. Look, I agree, and I think I tweeted out a couple of years ago watching the Super Bowl that how ridiculous it is that Metallica has not played it. When you go to every single football game, you'll hear 4 or 5 Metallica songs. I think I went to a Raider game, like 9.
And AC/DC. Listen, I'm not the biggest AC/DC fan in the world, and I'm also not the biggest Guns N' Roses fan in the world. But they're still alive, they're still kicking, but they have a limited window. So if you're going to do a thing where there's Metallica with special guests, you would think it would be AC/DC, Guns, bands like that. The time to do it is now. The time to do it is right now. You can't wait anymore.
I agree 1,000%. The other problem, though, is that, and they could change this. I wish they would, but the Super Bowl makes you tape everything. And if you watch the artist, some stuff is live, some stuff is tape, but they want you to tape everything. And they're saying, well, just in case something happens. Yeah, but it's like those guys are not going to do that. They're going to go out and play live because they can, and it would be amazing. And if their crew is allowed to be in charge of everything, there won't be any issues. Because the famous thing when they had Gaga at the Grammys, there's a whole the mic got unplugged, and they played a show that night at the Hollywood Palladium, and I asked their sound guy that night, I said, what happened? He said, yeah, it wasn't us. It was a local crew that was doing it, and some idiot dancer on stage stepped on a cord and unplugged the vocal mic to James, and they could never figure out how to get it back on. I said, if we were doing it, that wouldn't happen. So so there's some technical issues there as well. But I do know they want to do it, and I do know everybody on planet Earth, pretty much, that's a fan of rock and metal and even just music would love to see them do it. How great would that be? But we'll see. I would love it. I hope it happens, but I remain skeptical. Sadly.
You're not holding your breath, is what you're saying.
No, not at all. Well, we'll see, because I do know they would love to play the Super Bowl, so we'll see.
Yeah, it would be a very nice springboard into the Sphere. Make for a nice tidy year for them.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's not for them not wanting to do it. It's just the particulars of who's booking it, and also just the way the NFL does it. But you never know. Things can change, and there might be like, hey, we've done hip hop and all the pop for all these years. Let's spin it around, because Metallica. I mean, I remember talking to Lars when I first saw them on this run, and he was saying they've never sold this many tickets. In a weekend, they're saying 140,000 tickets. I mean, they're one of the biggest, if not the biggest band on the world right now, or artist in the world.
I've seen this tour maybe 6 cities now, and it's always a great show. But then it's so funny, I was at Back to the Beginning in Birmingham, and they played like a 40-minute set, and they didn't have it. They weren't in the round. They didn't have all the production stuff. It was just 4 guys on a stage. And even though there were 40,000 people there or whatever it was, it actually felt like a really stripped down Metallica show.
Yeah, well, it is, right?
Yeah.
It was crazy. They did Johnny Blade, by the way. That's a very Metallica thing to do, is just pull out a song from out of nowhere. I was watching it at home, and I was with some friends of mine, and we're all kind of like, what song is this? And then I realized about a minute and a half in, oh my God, that's Johnny Blade from Never Say Die. That was insane.
They were great. They were absolutely perfect.
They're never not great. That's for sure. Well, dude, thank you again for doing this. Much appreciated. It's always fun having you on, and I love to hear your passion for music, and certainly for Metallica too.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
I appreciate you having me on, and I'll wait for the call for round 3.
That's right. No worries. We'll get there.
Cool, man.
All right, man. You can't leave yet.